All right, all, hello and welcome. So we're going to jump into it and get started. Happy morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're from. We're happy to have you here. This is the Conversational Collective. So this is a group that started actually a few years ago, probably under a different name if you've been joining us this entire time. They kind of recently rebranded last year. We got a bunch of new organizers, but we've got a bunch of the cool folks that helped make it happen from the beginning still with us. And really, this community is about learning and exploring and understanding the different emerging technologies involved in conversational design, and obviously at the end of that, humans and the people involved with it. So you are joining us for a very cool panel. I'm actually really super excited about this. So Jason, Rupal, and Yina will be talking a little bit about New Year, New Bot, so trends that are happening in 2022. Very excited about that. And I'll give them all a little bit of time to introduce themselves because I'm not going to do it justice. But my name is Megan. You'll see here it says that I'm a director at USAA. That actually just changed this week. So I'm actually at Highmark Health. So if we're going to talk about healthcare, that would be cool. I'd love to hear a little bit about it. Hint, hint. But enough about me. Let's talk a little bit about the other organizers. So our list is, if you've been at past ones, our list has grown, which is great because we've needed quite a bit of help to keep everything organized. And we're super happy to have everyone here. You'll notice that Bhishma is like Cher. Okay, he only has the one name and that's what he goes by. So you kind of leave it at like that. But you know, there's probably room, I assume, in the future for other folks to join us. We will take as much help as we can get with this growing community. So it's all very, it's very exciting. I'm sure you all have noticed everything's kind of very focused on conversational these days. And a big thank you to our sponsor, Voxable. So Matt and Lauren, yay. We will have more details if you are interested in becoming a sponsor. If you are potentially interested in hosting events, we'll see. More of details with that will be coming out soon, but you know, Voxable is amazing. That crew helped start this place and really get it going. So sign up for their beta. They also have learning programs. So if you'd like to understand more about voice and conversational, please go over there and check it out. And of course, join our community. We would love to have you. You can join us through the bit.ly. We also have rooms or meeting areas and groups on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Slack. Join us through any one of those or all of those. You can also check us out on Twitter, and that's typically where we're going to do a lot of our live feed stuff. But really, you can get updates or join anywhere you're comfortable. And we'd love to hear from you, not just join, but also, you know, become a part of our group. Like I said, you can join our Slack, our LinkedIn. We'd love to have you. You can get our newsletter, which is fantastic and has a ton of informational links. And of course, we would love feedback. So if you were like, wow, Megan seems to have had way too much coffee this morning, I don't know what that was about, we would love that feedback from you. And I would appreciate it. And with that in mind, we're going to wrap up a little bit. So you can learn about our upcoming events. We try to have one every month. Sometimes they're like this, where it's a panel. Sometimes it's educational. Sometimes it's just a hangout. We try to vary the events to keep the interest going. So please make sure to follow us. And I'm sure that we will have an event that meets your needs and what your comfort level is perfectly. And I'm going to stop share with that. Thank you for my spiel. So why are we here today? Let's rewind, because I just gave you a whole lecture. We've got a couple folks here. And by a couple, I mean Jason, Yina, and Rupal. And I'll give it to each of you to introduce, but they're going to talk a little bit about where conversation is going in 2022. It's funny because before the session, I said 2020, like it's just, I just keep reliving the year 2020, but it is actually 2022, shockingly enough. So why don't we start with Yina? Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, what you're passionate about.
Sure. I'm Yina. Hello, everybody. I'm the head of product design at Zep AI. I recently got promoted. The poster still had conversational product designer. Zep AI provides a conversational AI customer self-service and business productivity solutions for small, medium, and large businesses, really. Zap AI is an AWS partner, part of the AWS Contact Center Intelligence Program, and was awarded competency in machine learning and AI competency last year. So we've just finished a pilot with Independence Blue Cross, creating a virtual assistant that helps people find out about their copays, their claim status, or find a provider, or even check and evaluate their symptoms that they have. So after the pilot, we're now moving on to development and production of the bot. And thank you, Convo Collective, for inviting me. And I'm happy to be here and share my work with you.
All right, jump in, panel. Okay, I guess it's going to be Jason, and you need to explain to me that amazing stash you've got there.
Hey everyone, I am Jason Gilbert. I am the character designer, conversation designer at Intuition Robotics, where we create LEQ, the social companion robot for aging Americans in the US. So LEQ is a small little robot that helps people who live by themselves stay healthy. They keeps them motivated, hence the headband, because we're all about keeping people, motivated and achieving their goals, but also keeping them company, providing companionship, giving them reminders to take their pills if they need to. And I am really excited to be on this panel. The mustache is a funny story. I was doing a video for LinkedIn and I glued it to, and yeah, I haven't been able to pull it off yet, but it may come off at some point during the session. So if it does, everything's fine. I'm not a leopard. I hope not.
Really? It was glued?
Yeah, I used actually like makeup artist glue on the thing, and I was like, okay, it's probably, but it's just stuck. So I'm like, this is a nice look. I'm just gonna stick with it.
Rocking it. Rupal.
How do you follow that? All right. My name is Rupal Patel. I'm the founder and CEO of VocaliD. I'm not a conversational designer. My company, VocaliD, what we do is we create unique synthetic voices for applications that talk. And so we've been working with brands in terms of creating their unique branded voice for their products. And I think we see a trend this year in terms of from chatbot to voice bot, right? And I think what our main focus has been on voices that are diverse, that really sound like the world of voices we hear in our everyday environment. And so for us, I think hearing voices that are more unique and representative of our diverse world, I think that's going to be a big thing, and we're really excited about that. We've been working with voice talent to create their voices, and so we've also been working with a diverse voice talent across the country and also actually across the world. We're only in English and Spanish right now, but we're really excited about what 2022 holds, and I hope that it's putting behind some of the stuff that we've been in purgatory with for the last couple of years and moving on with some new exciting things. And thank you for having me here.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us. I see everybody is very excited in the chat. I am too. And with that was a perfect segue, because we're going to open it up with, what are you most excited about development wise in 2022? And we can just start with Rupal, since we finished with you.
I think what I'm most excited about in 2022 is that there is more conversation about what the voice should sound like. And I think forever when we've talked about chatbots, I think a lot of times, or sort of voice bots, I guess, it's been a lot about the speech in. So how do you recognize different people from different places and the different commands and so on and so forth? But the emphasis on the voice out has just been kind of like functional, as long as it talks, right? And I think for applications, think about LEQ, think about anything that's supposed to make a relationship with the user. It can't just be a voice. And I'm not only talking about accents and things like that. I'm also talking about the fact that the voice needs to be appropriate for the context. So if you're talking to an elderly person, should it be talking slower so that the individual can comprehend what is being said out loud? Should it be similar to them in terms of preferences. Maybe that, you know, they have a loudness in perception. And so potentially there's a way to change and modify the way it speaks to them. So I think that it's really important when we start thinking about voice out, not only in terms of the typical things that we think about, like accent and type and so on and so forth, but just really delivery, right? And there's a whole term around this called prosody, which refers to the pitch, loudness, the inflection of the voice. And that's so important because it's not just the words that we hear, it's also the way that the words are conveyed that is most important in getting those intentions met. So I'm really excited that we can finally enter that conversation rather than just talking about did the right term or did the right command was executed at the right time. I think we're beyond some of the NLP stuff, and hopefully now we can get to the actual interaction and the intent.
Love it.
Love to hear what like Jason and Nina have to say about that.
Well, I'm really excited. Sorry, you know, if you're about to say something, I am super excited about all the virtual, the metaverse. Like everyone's talking about it, but we're actually starting to see it now. We're starting to see like companies like Soul Machines putting like actual virtual avatars. I'm super excited about that because to me that's sci-fi. That's like this is what I was hoping for growing up, is to have this. And then I'm going to probably talk about this a lot later on, but in-house robots, which is, I think, the year 2022 is going to be the year where a lot of people are going to start getting in-house robots. And I'll talk more about that later on. But I am super excited because this is a great time to be in this industry and to create these things. This isn't like these text chatbots anymore that are kind of boring. These are actually avatars and robots and stuff. So I'm super excited about that. Like my friend Wally here, my favorite robot of all time. So you know, I hope we get to see that kind of stuff. Well, not the end of the world, obviously, but you know, just fun robots.
It's funny that you mentioned metaverse. I don't know if everyone saw the recent Walmart video about the future metaverse, future Walmart in the metaverse. I really question because it was basically a physical Walmart in the metaverse. It's like, dude, why do you need a metaverse if you're gonna build a physical Walmart in the metaverse? So, I mean, I would, if I were to design it, everything would be voice. Like you would be like, order me toilet paper, and then there you go. And then that space is a completely cool space. Things comes out of nowhere. Like that's a metaverse. So I think we're still, I mean, companies are still figuring out how they're gonna, you know, present in the metaverse. But it is a very exciting time to enter this industry right now because it has a lot of potential, especially in the metaverse.
Yeah, especially for going off of the Walmart, we're talking about kind of larger organizations. There are many places and ways that they can focus, and I think that's becoming kind of a tricky thing. So I'd love to hear a little bit from you all about, you know, we're talking about large orgs and building out bot, or actually probably system of bots, depending. How can they be better about doing that? I think, you know, we've moved past, like you all kind of hinted at, we've moved past kind of the basics of a lot of things. And now it's more than just having a bot that answers questions or recognizes the intent or whatever else, you know, beep, boop, ones and zeros. So what, you know, in 2022, where can large orgs really invest their focus and their time?
One of the ways that Zep AI has been trying to lower the entry to companies getting into the conversational AI space was creating a conversational search bar, which is, I think conversational search is going to be big in 2022, because if you go to any website, government website, non-government website, their search bar sucks. Like you can't find anything on their site because their search bar just doesn't work. So a conversational search bar allows people to search just by natural language. And in our company, we have hooked up with Amazon Kendra as well. So it will very intelligently parse unstructured data and improve the search like 1,000 times. And it can also include the functionality of the chatbot. So it's a way to introduce chatbot without it being or looking like a chatbot. It's basically just a search bar that they can slap on their website. And it also can work as a chatbot as well. So that's a way of our company trying to lower the barrier of entry for a lot of companies who are maybe not very familiar with chatbots or doubt if chatbot actually works because of their own experience trying chatbot and the chatbot doesn't work. Everyone's like have the idea of, oh, chatbot doesn't work, right? But having a search bar that will immediately improve their site search already, and then can slowly introduce the idea of chatbot, I think it's gonna help the adoption of a lot of companies.
I love that idea. I think that's just brilliant as a way to sort of slowly introduce companies to this process. I do think large companies though, Megan, you're saying, I think we're beyond that asking information. I still think large companies are stuck in that world. I don't think they're thinking really about the benefits of voice and about what you can do with multimodal aspects. So it's like, it's not just voice or no voice, right? It's voice, and then using that with search means like that there's a visual confirmation as well. And so I think introducing voice in a multimodal way, to me, feels like I've been using this analogy a lot. It's sort of slowly introducing, and I think it's the same thing with synthetic voice, is slowly introducing voice as part of the diet of media consumption, right? And so you don't make people switch immediately from meat to vegetarian. You have to slowly introduce things to them. And I think that might be part of our goal in this industry, to think about ways in which voice can be introduced in concert with other modalities as well.
Yeah, I would say two words. Empathy is number one. I think empathy has to be creating empathetic. I mean, we're here in healthcare, right? And so we need to understand how to talk to people. And I think part of the problem that we have is that a lot of times programmers are writing content and not people that are conversation designers or psychologists. So I think empathetic AI, which is a really tricky concept if you think about it, because how is a robot or a chatbot or any kind of virtual AI supposed to mimic empathy? Is it, how does that look? What does that look like? And so that's a real challenge as you try to design these types of entities. And inclusivity, I think, is another huge word for 2022. I think we need to be able to create conversations that talk to everyone and have teams that are made up of people that are from different backgrounds. So it's not just the same type of voice speaking. It's a whole bunch of different contributions. So for me, those are the big things that the enterprises need to embrace. Whatever technology they choose to use, whatever they choose to go, they need to be empathetic, and they need to have inclusivity and diversity in their teams creating it.
Yeah, totally agree. A lot of bots right now are not very inclusive, and that's definitely an area that we have to work on.
Well, I think the personas are designed by a product designer. And I think the audience who's going to consume, this product are not necessarily engaged in that process. And so that user-centric design, we talk a lot about that in all sorts of other aspects of design. But when it comes to voice, we think, well, the product designer will decide the voice, and I definitely feel like breaking the mentality of the one voice for one product. If we're going to talk about metaverse, we're all going to personalize what this is. So why is it that we need to be thinking about that one voice model for the one product? I get it that it can't be sort of a schizophrenic brand where it can be everything, for anyone. But at the same time, the fact that we can micro segment the audience base and then think about the voice for that individual I think it's time to go beyond that. And I don't know if big companies are there. I think even small companies aren't there yet. I think even the nimble startups aren't there yet. They're thinking that conversation, that their bot is all about the right message being pulled up at the right time. And even if the conversational designer designs this thing, the voice part of it is still kind of like, well, whatever, it talks and people are comfortable with it. We can't change it. The mentality that we can't change is because that's how we started, I think is one where, I think we can challenge that.
Yeah, building off of a little bit of what you were all talking about in regard to empathy, we got kind of a question that really touches on that. So actually speaking, what are some processes that you have used in your product towards making your AI assistant more empathetic? And I think this really applies to anything. So we think home assistants, but really empathy can come out of every conversation, including an intelligent search. So, across the board, maybe we can start with Jason, but when we talk about empathy, how?
How do you do it? That's a great question. And I think we're still trying to figure that out, how to create empathetic agents. And I think that part of it is trying to understand that the person on the other end is a person, that's not a user, like we say, it's an actual person that has actual needs, and trying to understand that. And I think that a lot of times we forget that because we have, and I say I talk about product managers and I talk about, people that are all about KPIs and things like that, but they forget that there's a person on the other end. And if we're talking about healthcare, we need to be able to reach these people. We need to be able to talk to them at eye level. And so that comes from how we design the conversations, how we design the flows, how we do all these things. So we have to create a sense that we hear, we acknowledge what they're saying. And I think that's a big thing, is acknowledging. And from there, just being able to, the language, from the linguistics. And I think that the addition of so many linguists coming into the field is amazing, is the language, the type of language that you use. I'll give you an example. If someone says something really bad happened to me, you shouldn't say, well, at least this didn't happen to you, because that's not really empathetic. And so a lot of times we say that to our friends, but as an agent who's trying to be empathetic, you want to encourage someone. You don't want to be judgmental. So you don't want to say, at least you're not this. You want to say, well, I understand you're going through something very difficult right now. Is there something I can do to help you? So the idea here is to really look at the language that we're using and study the language, and then going to Rupal can talk more about this, and the actual tone of voice and the prosody and all these things. And above all, I think that if we're talking about avatars or robots, we're talking about back channeling, non-verbal stuff to create the empathy, whether it's sound effects, emotes, whether it's just these types of things, which make robots really cool. If you think about it, like this guy right over here, Wally, doesn't say a word, but he is the most empathetic thing in the world, because he just makes all these sounds and he has gestures and things like that. And I see a lot of it with Moxie from Embodied. The company called Embodied has created this robot called Moxie for kids. And if you look at the gestures and its eyes and the way and the body language, the paralanguage, it's absolutely built for empathy. And I think that that's what we need to strive for. So it's a combination of linguistics and paralanguage, in my opinion, as well as a bunch of other things, but those are the two main things.
Isn't there some system that can read the emotion off of language? I mean, I haven't tried any of them yet, and I don't know how well they work. But apparently, there's some emotion analysis that you can do. But I mean, yeah, and I mean, without that, it's all the designer, right? Like, it's all about thinking, what can this person feel at this moment? What can this person say at this moment, to build empathy into your design? But I think that there are some, there are technology developing for that, to read emotions.
I think those are pretty crude in terms of sort of bucketing into emotion into 5-6 different kinds of kind of pretty, I don't know, canonical kinds of emotions, like,
so
sad,
developing
eyebrows must be whatever. So I think the worry here a lot is, I mean, I think the biggest thing, like, to be empathetic, you have to be a good listener, right? And so really listening to what the user is saying. I think that listening. The other thing, I agree totally with what Jason was saying in terms of linguistics and paralinguistics and all of that. Additionally, I'd add silence. We're very uncomfortable with silence. And we think that if we're talking to a robot, it should be instant, right? But that silence gives people time to process, right? And it gives people time to sit with something. And that is really when we make connection. And so maybe that's the time where the bot can be doing paralinguistic things, and it doesn't need to be talking or delivering information. It can just really be feeling with the person, right? With the user. I think that in healthcare, particularly, especially when we start thinking about, there's a lot of applications these days in terms of not just physical health, but mental health and loneliness. And I think it's really important that we think about ways in which we are with our loved ones when they're going through something more challenging, right? The number one thing is listening. It's interesting. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday who's just having a really tough time. At one point, I thought I would pick up the phone and call. But honestly, we were getting more out of, like, more truth was coming out because it was a text conversation, because it felt a little bit like they could be anonymous. You didn't have to have everything read. And so the ability to go back and forth between face-to-face, just voice alone, and all of those, and maybe even shutting off the capability of looking at the user at that time. There may be something really powerful that happens when we think about the various different modes we have. So I would think number one for me is listen. The other is like use silence as an actual part of the conversation. I think that's going to be huge. Mirroring, like mirror neurons is how we create some of this aspect of empathy, right? So how do we really get in that person's shoes?
Yeah, it's funny because even when, as people interacting, the idea of silence and a pause, if somebody says, do you want to go to lunch? And you just kind of pause for a second, there's so much read in that and saying, oh, maybe you don't, and that's okay. But as part of that, it's not only just different personalities, it's also, we talked a little bit earlier about this, like different places, like literally different locations, and the difference between like a public conversational experience and an in-home. So are there different, like, I'm going back to a question that was asked a little bit earlier that I think fits perfectly in here, but are there aspects of conversation designs that differ when we're talking about designing for kind of a home bot versus maybe one that's more publicly available? What are the aspects per environment?
It's contextual. To me, that's the biggest thing. It's context. Like, one of the biggest issues that I had with chatbots in the past was I was creating chatbots and they were talking to people on Facebook Messenger or on Alexa or whatever. Sorry if I triggered anyone's device, but you really never knew where they were. Once you have an idea about the context of where the person you're talking to is, that changes the entire dynamic of the conversation. If I know, for instance, LEQ is going to be in someone's home, it's probably going to be in their living room, they live by themselves, it's going to be a completely different experience. And I know what I know what I can ask them. I know where they are in at any particular time of the day to engage them in a certain, customized or tailored type of activity, or just listen to them. But I know that they're in a certain place. If I don't have context, it's super hard to really create any type of emotional bond between the agent and the person, because you don't know where they are. They could be in a car, they could be in, in the mall, they could be wherever, So I think that knowing where they are, contextual awareness is huge.
Yeah, and I mean, generally in public, of course, you can't disclose any private information. I think that's the obvious one, right? Like in private, you can, check your account balance or whatever, check your diagnosis, but not in public. I mean, when you're riding the bus and all of a sudden your assistant going, oh, your account balance is $2,500, and that's just wrong, right? So that's the obvious one, privacy. And I agree with Jason, like context is super important, even with, if we're just considering in a house, for example, is your Alexa in the living room, in the kitchen, in the bedroom? Where is the, I think the Alexa can have markers of where that device's location is. So if a person is shouting from the bedroom to the kitchen, to like set a timer for something that the person was cooking, it will be a different design from, if someone is standing right in the kitchen and can immediately action on whatever they want. So and me coming from an architecture background also would actually give me more consideration on context and location as well.
That's a good example with Alexa, because they just came out with Amazon's Astro. I don't know if everyone's heard about Amazon Astro. Amazon Astro is this sort of in-house robot that does a lot of things in healthcare related, but it maps out the house, so it knows where you are in the house, and that way it creates its context. So I think Amazon realized that very quickly, that they don't know where people are talking to. Is it on their phone in the car, or is it, like you said, in the house, they're screaming? But with Amazon Astro, I can sort of, there's huge privacy issues there that we don't have time to get into, but like the idea is amazing. If you think about it, like, okay, I know that you're in your house by yourself. I know that maybe you've fallen down and you haven't gotten up in an hour. That's maybe a time for me to alert someone for me to alert someone that you're not getting up. So understanding that, I don't see Alexa as she is right now being able to do those types of things in healthcare. The fact that we can see, that we have sight, allows us to sometimes even save lives.
That's a good point. And speaking of context, since you guys are just lining everything up, it's perfect. It's like it was all planned. But how should chatbots or bots, voice assistants respond to when there's a major world event, say a pandemic happening with changes going on every day? But really, we're talking about context. That's kind of a major context that we're living through right now. So, how should we respond where it is, genuine? We're talking about that empathy, but also is solving for the need, actually connecting with that person. That's a tough question too. So.
We haven't really considered building the pandemic into our bot at all, but I think it can exist in the form of what we call small talks. Like if somebody just, chat you up and be like, what do you think of the pandemic? What have you experienced? We can design a response for that. That's the only way I can think about it.
Well, it's an interesting question. It really is, because it really, when it happened in 2020, like if you ask GPT-3, I know there's a question in the chat here about GPT-3, it doesn't have any information about COVID-19, for instance. So there's a perfect example of this really expensive, I don't know how many billions of parameter neural network that doesn't understand a thing about this major event that's happening in the world right now. And so the only virtual agents and chatbots that were able to deal with that were ones that were more, what I would say, weak AI or more pattern-based. And those are the ones that you can, like you say, you can add them to small talk, or you can do what the World Health Organization did. They teamed up with, I think, Soul Machines, and they created this COVID-19 bot, which kept people updated on the information. But there's a lot of humans in that loop. There isn't a process yet where I think AI is able to, it's on its own, update it with the information. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some people here that are deep neural network scientists that can provide examples, but I haven't seen any yet that are able to do it without manual human intervention. And I remember when I was creating Anna, a previous chatbot, when the pandemic broke, I had to fill in, okay, what is COVID-19? What are the symptoms? What are the causes? where do I get tested? And it keeps changing, because we keep on getting new guidelines. So there has to be a human in the loop is I think the issue.
Mhm.
Absolutely, and I think it's a lot of the back channel, right? Like it's the what's not said too. I mean, do we really want to hear in-house robot or whatever talk to us about the pandemic? You're already inundated with it, but is there other ways in which other topics that you may want to talk about, that are more nuanced? So is it informational or is it more for conversation? I think that's the one distinction we rarely make is the bot for information or is it for conversation? And I think we think it's for conversation, but we feed it information. And I think that is something that we can't seem to get past, that we always think that this has to be all about pushing. It's one-way interaction. The bot is all knowing, and so it should give you the information. But I think one thing we haven't figured out is what information does the user want at that moment? What do they need? What would they benefit from? That truly is, I think, when we get to empathetic, is understanding what the user's wants are in that context, and then being able to meet that through this bot. We're way away from that, but I think that that's something we could strive for.
Got another question from the audience. So one trend I've noticed is more teams moving to generative or probabilistic models like Alexa conversations or GPT-3. What are some of the challenges of designing for models like this that can generate their own responses rather than relying on scripted responses?
One word, Tay. People remember Microsoft Tay?
Fair.
Okay, so that's the biggest issue right now, as far as I can see. And I've played around and I've toggled all these things on GPT-3, and no matter what I do, I can always get it to a corner where it says it hates a certain minority or that it dislikes a certain thing. It always gets there. And so if you're a brand and you're trying to use GPT-3 in any kind of way, it's super dangerous. I would highly recommend, trying to avoid it if you can, because you really don't know what it's going to say at times, and you can take it to really dark places. So I would be very careful about using GPT-3. Although I have seen, I think Replica AI does it with their chatbots, but I think they have their target audience is a bit more open to those types of conversations than most of probably customers of airlines and healthcare providers.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically it's great. I love playing around with it. I don't know, OpenAI is amazing. If you ever wanted to generate a poem or create a horror story or do all these other types of things. But if you're looking at it as, hey, this is going to solve my conversational issues, then like I said before, you still need a human in the loop, and GPT-3 is just it's not there yet. And they keep on coming up with these bigger and bigger models. And the best chatbot in the world is still Mitsuku Cookie by Steve. And it's a handwritten chatbot. It's basically rules-based. I'm not saying that we should all use rules-based. I'm saying a nice combination of the two, because you have to have the AI and the NLU, but you have to have some kind of control and a human in the loop. And that we're not at the point yet where we can remove humans, thankfully, because I need a job. So I'm glad that's.
I think GTP3 is mostly for automation, right? Like it can, generate its own response, and you don't really need a human. So for tasks like, actually a company use GPT-3 for support, like anything that is related to our website or how to use our tools. Those documentations are all there. So just, GPT-3 can just generate whatever response they need. So I would say the merit is mostly in the automation area.
And in creating multiple versions potentially of a response. And so the idea that you can sort of start with something, it's a generator, but it's not necessarily a great final product, and so I think it's important to make that distinction. It also could be useful, GPT-3 and things like this, for doing that first pass through tons of data in terms of annotations and things of that sort. But or finding information like a needle in a haystack, but it's not necessarily where you want to leave all of your you don't put all your eggs in that basket. It's I think so much of what we're doing today, there has to be a human in the loop. When you just think that these machines are going to do all of it, there'll always be a use case where there's an edge case where you missed that. It wasn't designed, it wasn't thought of, and I think that will be the important one. That's just the way it is. And so I think we're kidding ourselves that it's all going to be, or not kidding ourselves, but I think we're fearing this thing where the machine knows everything, and yet that's not what any one of us wants. And there will always be a way that we will not find that satisfying because it will be too predictable. Humans want uncertainty because uncertainty is why we live. Uncertainty is why we exist. And so why are we trying to make everything predictable?
Wow, getting philosophical here.
Getting deep. Yeah, it's not a magic
deep.
box. You don't drop some thoughts in and then it automatically produces the perfect interaction. That's not, I've noticed in my experience, I've had to kind of explain that to folks that are maybe not as familiar of like, I can't just take a couple words and have it doesn't just figure out everything magically for you. And as part of that's training is kind of a big part of that. So we have a question around that. One of the major barriers in this space is getting access to training speech data set. Actually, I've dealt with that too. Are there any suggestions for that?
Not Reddit. Let's start there. I would say I don't have any suggestions for where to get it, but I have suggestions on where not to get it. And I think that's the main problem is we're going to places like Reddit, and that's why we're getting this information, which is, it's not useful, and it's all oftentimes leads to really bad places. So the question, it's a really good question. I don't have the answer. I don't think anyone has the answer yet, but I'd love to hear if anyone else seems, but I know where not to get it. So if that helps.
I've seen people augment speech these days with synthesized speech, and we've been asked to do this actually for a lot of instructional and training kinds of applications where they would have necessarily had to hire, potentially an actor reading a script and so on and so forth to do that, or record people in those contexts, and instead they have a variety of contextual scripts from before, and then you can have various different speech synthesizers actually read that script, and then also we provide the capability of changing some of the prosodic elements of it too. And so you could use those tools to generate new speech data, which actually has been an interesting way to think about ways in which they're using synthesis to improve recognition and then also improve the conversational aspect of the flow as well. So I think that's kind of interesting, especially when we start talking about voices that are accented and potentially unique voices as well.
Actually, I'm really curious. Rupal, maybe you can help. How do you brand a healthcare voice, in terms of providing healthcare and we were talking about it in Woman in Voice yesterday, but for example, McDonald's or other big chains, it's quite easy to come up with a brand in the sound, but how do you do that in healthcare? Have you done it before?
We have had so many conversations and with folks in healthcare, and I think healthcare is just not there yet, in my opinion. I think in terms of the voice out, I think healthcare is thinking a lot about the voice in, and I think about the right language to be said at the right time. We're starting to have some conversations. In fact, Jason and I just been talking about what are the voice aspects, everything from even pharmacy to there's so much resistance to the change of the voice. I'll tell you, large pharmacy, retail pharmacy right now uses a particular voice when you ask for you to pick up the pills, right? They are so afraid to change that voice from that super robot sounding voice to another voice because they think all their elderly patients are going to, or users are going to be scared that it's a scam. And yet it is so not inclusive. It is so outdated. It is such a horrible way to think about that brand because it's forward thinking in so many ways. And yet there's someone on their team that's like, oh, if we change it, it will be bad. They're not even willing to try. So I think, honestly, I come from the healthcare background, you know, and I'm you know, I was a speech therapist for many years and then became a speech scientist and so on. I think healthcare takes very few chances. And I think it's very resistant to that change. And they honestly have a very high ego around content, information, and not about, so bedside manner was always thought of as being soft, right? And it was all about what the doctor says to you and the information the doctor has. And yet we know that bedside manner is actually what people care about, right? That's at the end of the day, how they relate to a patient. All of that, I feel like we're repeating the same issues when it comes to the conversational or the bots in healthcare. It's all about content and about the information and so little about the rest of it. And I think it's a huge mistake, especially when we see this in mental health, which is a huge pet peeve of mine. Is like, you're talking about mental health. How is it that you just think about the words and not about anything else beyond those words? Anyway, I could go on for hours, and I'm not.
Right. I know. I have uncapped a top lit Thursday. Okay.
Yeah, the voice is very tough in that aspect. It's very tough to get the voice to create the empathy, and a lot of us are relying on TTS voices, whether it's Amazon Polly or whether it's the Google Voice, and it just doesn't have that range that, you know, you could write as a conversation designer. I could write the most empathetic lines, but when they're spoken by the agent and the voice and the TTS, they just sound disingenuous at best, or they sound sometimes even condescending. So it's a huge challenge to be able to find the right words in that character's voice. And I totally agree with Rupal about the legacy about companies not wanting to change the voice because they don't want to scare off their existing customers or their existing patients. I see that as well. So I 100% agree with that.
Well, it's one of those. It's one of those highly regulated industries, right? Healthcare, law, you know, government. Those are usually resistant to change.
But I think they also don't want to spend on that. I don't think they think it's a place to spend. So Jason, when you say, you know, we're using Amazon Polly and Google, blah, blah, blah. So you're using generic things. So, and also expecting that the machine itself is going to do all of these things. And there's so many new technologies available today. When you blend speech synthesis with speech conversion, you can actually have a lot of power there. But companies are unwilling to spend on that. They'll be willing to spend millions of dollars or whatever on the front end. Oh, recognize every speaker, every blah, 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 you know, but you know, as long as the thing talks, I've done my part, you know, and it's that final mile that really is really important for adoption. And it's just slap on whatever you have. I think we've done this with so many products before. The only reason that people are willing to wear headphones these days is because they feel more comfortable to people. It didn't matter when people really needed headphones or needed inserts into their ears for hearing aids. They made plastic and hard. But now that each of us wears them, now the materials that goes into putting them into our ears, we spend on that. We've thought about that. So I think it's a big hole in what people perceive as their product.
That's a great question, Matt, in the chat here about the smart speakers. I just read somewhere that Alexa is trying to recruit people to make it more fun because it's just not fun. They're using it, like you said, just for, you're saying, playing music and setting timers or reminders, and that's absolutely right. No one's actually talking to Alexa. No one's actually doing anything other than, hey, you know, what's the weather or this? So I think they realize that, and I think that that's part of creating personality. And I think that that's something that everyone needs to think about. And a few years ago, I was talking about personality and chatbots, and people would say, why does it need a personality? But now I think everyone realizes that they all need a personality. And if you don't give it a personality, people will anthropomorphize and give it a personality on their own, and you don't want them setting the narrative for your agent. So I think it's very important, if it has personality and it's engaging, you're going to want to talk to it. And I think that if you can create something that people want to talk to, and not just have to talk to, then you're succeeding. And I think that a lot of it is like Rupal is saying, is the tone of voice and the prosody and what you're in, the power language and all the other things as well. And until Alexa gets that, I think they're going to hit the same wall.
I think we're coming up on time, so I'm going to ask one last question. I'd love for all of you to answer, but if you could tell the folks here and around the world, give them one thing, a maxim or a lesson to take into 2022 when working on these experiences, what is that one thing?
Always expect the unexpected. And I think that's when we design, we're like, okay, it's going to go this way, and they're going to ask this, and the flow is going to go this way. And then we put it out and we realize, oh, wait a second, no, they're not doing that at all. They're doing something completely different. So when I say expect the unexpected, do a fair amount of testing, whether it's internally, whether it's before the process starts, it's Wizard of Oz testing, or when the process, get actual people in the demographic. Do what needs to be done to see how people are reacting to it, so that you have a better idea of what it's going to be like when it's out there in the wild, is my advice.
To piggyback on that, the optimization after you launch a voice assistant or chatbot is super important, because those real data will teach you exactly what Jason was saying, what you did not expect at all, and then you create a solution for it. So that's the only way to make your bot better and better.
I'd also say, on the voice trend, is try it in a few different ways, right? That same script said in different ways with different intonations could make a difference. So don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Just because it didn't work the first time doesn't necessarily mean that it was the right, that was something wrong with it. Think about the various different versions of that can have an impact on the end user. So oftentimes we think, oh, we got to change everything. You don't have to change everything. I think do this more systematically so that we can determine what the root cause was for the failure, if there was one. So take a much more, a scientific approach to determining what that, where it broke down, the communication breakdown was. And I don't think people know. I think if you ask the question, where did it break down? I think you have to observe what happened as opposed to ask people. People don't know it. They know it broke down. They don't know why it broke down. And we don't know that in real life conversations either. We have conversations with people all the time and we don't know why we got into an argument. We know that it didn't go well, but I think asking them why it didn't go well is probably the wrong tact, right? I think there's observation and there's other ways to figure that out.
All great points. I'm sure there are about 1,000 more lessons that we all probably need to take with us, but I love those, and I truly do believe that they are definitely things that should be kept in mind. Also, always the lesson of remember Tay. Don't be that way. But I want to just thank all our panelists for joining us this morning. Super insightful. We have a ton more questions. I know we can't get to them all, but that doesn't mean that people can't obviously reach out to you in your spaces. And Jason regularly does videos, as he is set up for one that he did this morning. So check them out on LinkedIn. Please, if you loved this chat as much as I did, feel free to join Conversational Collective, our group. You can find us on LinkedIn. We also have a Slack channel. We are on Facebook, like I said, Twitter. If you are super passionate, I'm sure that we can find a space for you to help organize as well. We're always looking for new folks. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us today, and have a good morning, evening, or afternoon. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you so much for hosting this and doing such a lovely job of moderating this, Megan. I think it was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot just looking at the chat. So this has been a lot of fun for me too. Thank you, and thank you, Matt.
Likewise. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Joe. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Have a good
everyone.
day.
Good day.